For the last few months, Ukraine has been taking aim at Russian oil and gas, and it has been working. Russia's oil refineries are going up in flames as Ukraine hits them with drones over and over, and it has combined that approach with hitting Russian ports and oil transmission infrastructure. But now Ukraine is ready to do more. It's not going to try to fix something that isn't broken. Ukraine's refinery strikes will continue. However, Ukraine has a new strategy that leaves Russia exposed and outgunned, and it all comes down to a commodity that is key to the running of any country: electricity. On November 5th, Stefan Korshak, writing for the Kyiv Post, revealed that Ukraine has expanded the scope of its long-range strikes against Russia. While it had previously focused on refineries and, in the case of the Black Sea strikes, warships, Ukraine is now targeting Russia's power grid. Its goal, Korshak says, is to cause massive blackouts across western and southern Russia. These blackouts would plunge Russian citizens into darkness and potentially prevent them from heating their homes, which would mean Ukraine is finally using a tactic against Russia that Vladimir Putin has used to hurt Ukraine since he launched his invasion. The first step in this grand blackout plan is simple. Take out as many electrical substations and transformers that are within range of Ukraine's drones and missiles as possible. As Korshak puts it, in a bid to break the Russian Federation's power grid and plunge industry and cities into blackouts, Ukraine's bombardment campaign against Kremlin oil and gas infrastructure has widened to blast power substations and electricity transformers across South and West Russia. But why these two pieces of equipment in particular? The reason is that both play critical roles in ensuring that electricity can be transmitted across Russia. The UK's national grid explains the role that a substation plays in the complex networks keep the lights on in a country. It says that electricity substations are responsible for converting electricity into different voltages, which is crucial for keeping electricity moving throughout the country so that it can be distributed to local regions and properties. Inside substations are specialist pieces of equipment called transformers, which handle the voltage switching. There are usually two types of substations in an electricity grid. Transmission substations, as the name implies, are where electricity enters a transmission network. They're typically located near major power sources, and they serve as the junctions through which different electrical circuits that crisscross a country connect to one another. The other type of substation handles distribution. These substations typically lower the voltage of the transmitted electricity to make it usable before it enters homes, businesses, and anything else in a region that requires electricity. Without them, the electricity being transmitted across a country would have a voltage so high that anything that plugs in could get damaged. If you've ever tried to power a device designed for a low voltage in a country that uses higher voltages, you've likely seen the result: pops, breaks, and even burning. As for transformers, we've already touched on what they do. These devices sit inside substations and they're needed to handle voltage switching. Think of them as the converters that make electricity usable by the general public. Transformers are often used to step up voltage, which in turn steps down current. High current is a problem because it leads to greater heat loss as electricity passes through a cable. So even at the most basic level, the loss of a transformer would cause monetary damage, minimal though it might be in the grand scheme of the war. Still, these two devices are critical to Russia's energy infrastructure. Without them, Russia's many regions simply lose access to electricity. And that brings us back to Ukraine's new strategy. Targeting the Russian facilities that generate electricity is off the table for Ukraine. These facilities are often well guarded, meaning a higher likelihood of Ukraine's drones being shot out of the sky. Plus, Russia produces around 18% of its electricity using nuclear power, and it envisions a future where it produces much more than that. Ukraine can't justify potentially creating a nuclear catastrophe to force blackouts across Russia, so it hits substations and transformers. These are the key links in Russia's energy grid that get electricity to where it needs to go. Ukraine has been hitting these pieces of infrastructure often and hard over the last few weeks. The most recent of those attacks was reported on by Military on November 5th. It says that Ukraine's drones targeted the Vladimir-skaya high-voltage substation in the Vladimir region overnight between November 4th and 5th. Videos have also emerged from the scene of the strike, indicating that Ukraine scored a direct hit. One of the videos, shared by Military, appears to be a recording of one of Ukraine's drones hitting the substation. We hear the buzz of the drone in the background, followed by an explosion behind a fence that is presumably guarding the substation. There's a big reason why Ukraine hit this substation, as Military explains. The Vladimir-skaya substation is one of the region's major energy facilities. Its installed capacity is about 4,010 MVA. The substation is a key hub, with numerous 110 to 750 kV power transmission lines branching out from it, serving the regional power grid. Its stable operation is critical to the reliability and balance of Russia's power system, the outlet says. It adds that this isn't the first time that Ukraine has hit this particular substation, as it struck it on October 31st as well. If Russia had managed to repair it in less than a week, Ukraine would have just forced the country's workers back to where they had just come from. The Kyiv Post provides a few more details, noting that there seem to be very few Russian air defenses guarding the vulnerable substation. Ukraine's drones encountered some scattered, though light, anti-aircraft fire. That was it. We made a point earlier about how Ukraine may not be able to strike Russia's electricity generation facilities. The lackluster defenses at the Vladimirskaya substation highlights why it's now hitting these links in Russia's electricity grid. They are easier to strike, and Ukraine gets the same results. The loss of this substation will also have a pronounced impact on thousands of people, Korshak notes in his Kyiv Post piece. He says that the substation transfers electricity from Russia's Volga hydroelectric power plant, its Kalinin nuclear power plant, and its Kostroma plant, which uses natural gas to generate electricity. That's a lot of plants sending electricity to one substation, and it's thanks to Vladimirskaya that the Vladimir and Ivanovo regions get their electricity. Total population potentially affected, at least 750,000. Oh, and the Vladimirskaya substation also serves the greater Moscow power grid. Korshak adds that it's likely that Ukraine used its Bober long-range drones for the Vladimirskaya substation strike. That drone, which took its first flight in 2023, is primarily used by Ukraine's main Directorate of Intelligence, and it was one of the country's first prominent unmanned aerial vehicles. It has a range of anywhere between 600 and 1,000 kilometers or 370 to 620 miles, depending on the variant. Plus, the Bober carries a KZ-6-shaped charge, which is designed specifically to penetrate hardened and armored surfaces. In July, Ukraine also updated the drone with a new control system that allows it to be operated like a first-person view drone, which may be why the Bober, which is also nicknamed the Beaver, is being used for these types of precision strikes. Russia doesn't care what Ukraine has used. It cares about the devastated substation that it now needs to repair. It's pretty clear why Vladimirskaya was a target for Ukraine on October 31st and November 5th, but we told you at the start of this video that these substation strikes are part of a new strategy. But there have to be more, and there are a lot more. Militani highlighted how what happened to one of Russia's most important substations on November 5th is far from an isolated incident. Just 2 days before that strike, the outlet reported that Ukraine had conducted 15 strikes in 15 days on Russia's electricity power system, knocking out 4% of its power generation in the process. We guess that the Vladimirskaya strike makes that at least 16 in 17 days. Or even 16 in 16 given the strike started on the night of November 4th. The point is that Ukraine is hitting Russia's power grid hard, and it's having results. The October 31st Vladimirskaya strike, for instance, disconnected 30,000 Russian citizens from their electricity and caused a 10% voltage drop in Moscow. In Nizhny Novgorod, where Ukraine hit the Arzamovskaya substation, 50,000 consumers were left without electricity. This strike also had a direct military purpose, as the region's ammunition production factories recorded a 25% reduction in production, according to Militani. Another strike in Voronezh knocked out power for 15,000 people and took 40% of the region's mobile networks offline. And again, we're seeing the impact. Tens of thousands of Russian people losing their access to electricity daily, and it's all thanks to Ukraine's new strategy. As we've hinted at with the mobile network comments, Ukraine's strikes aren't just causing blackouts. In the occupied Donbass region, a Ukrainian strike against one of its own substations caused a 50% reduction in water supply, as well as regional blackouts. Local airfields in Rostov experienced power shortages that would have stopped aircraft from taking to the skies in another strike. It's clear that there is as much of a military purpose to these substation and transformer attacks as there is a civilian distress purpose. Ukraine wants to bring the reality of the war home to Russian people with these strikes. But it's also using them to make Russia's forces on the front lines and far behind them less effective. Korshak takes an even wider view of the substation strikes in his piece for the Kyiv Post. He says that the outlet has counted Ukraine's strikes over almost a month, rather than the last 15 days, and the results show that Ukraine's new strategy is firmly embedded. Since October 13th, according to Kyiv Post counts, Ukrainian strike planners have launched at least 29 separate strikes directly targeting power grid infrastructure inside Russia or occupied Ukrainian territories, with attacks almost always seemingly intended to hit flammable sections of a transformer station to set a fire, Korshak writes. And it's here where we start to see the transformation, or perhaps more accurately, the evolution of Ukraine's long-range drone strategy. As we mentioned at the start of the video, Ukraine spent most of August, September, and October hitting Russia's oil refining capacity. We'll get into the effectiveness of those strikes in a moment, but the main point to remember right now is that these types of attacks took priority. How do we know? Korshak points out that Ukraine's drones targeted Russia's power grid just 10% of the time in August and September. Most of the drones focused on the aforementioned refineries, along with military units and Russian production. But between October 13th and today, Korshak has identified a shift. Ukraine carried out 76 strikes during that period, with 29 of them hitting power grid infrastructure. That's more than a third of Ukraine's drones now hitting substations and transformers, compared to 10% just a few months ago, suggesting that Ukraine has raised the power grid infrastructure up on its list of priorities. That's not to say that it's giving up on the refinery strikes. 29 out of 76 strikes on the power grid still leaves 47 strikes targeting refineries and other targets that Ukraine was focusing heavily on before October. What we're saying here is that Ukraine appears to have established a baseline in terms of its refinery strikes, and it's now adding to them with more attacks on Russia's substations. This is going to hurt Russia. And that pain will be felt by the country's citizens, who are already reeling from the effects of Ukraine's strikes on Russia's oil refining. According to United 24 media, Ukraine has just struck 21 of Russia's 38 largest oil refineries between January and the end of October 2025. It's also carried out 48% more successful strikes against Russia's refining sector than it managed in all of 2024, and there are still a couple of months left for it to hit more. Many of the refineries Ukraine is targeting are being hit several times in quick succession, which is a purposeful move designed to make it much harder for Russia to complete the repairs needed to get the refineries back online. We see echoes of the Vladimirskaya substation strike here. Ukraine hit that substation twice in the space of a week. The refinery strikes appear to have laid the blueprint for the evolution of Ukraine's long-range strategy. Coming back to the impact of Ukraine's refinery strikes, United 24 media says that Russia has lost almost 40% of its refining capacity by the end of October, with the natural result being that it's producing less fuel. That's what refineries do. They take crude oil and turn it into usable products such as gasoline and diesel. This loss of supply has led to price increases on fuel throughout Russia, along with marked declines in the amount of fuel that Russia is selling. Exports via the Black Sea and Azov Sea dropped 23.2% in September compared to the previous month, for example. So the refinery strikes are hitting Putin in his pocketbook. But the real danger of these strikes, when it comes to the Russian leader's seat of power, comes from the impact they're having on Russia's citizens. Beyond the price rises, civilians across many regions of Russia are now facing restrictions on the amount of gasoline they can buy. The Insider explains more in a November 3rd piece, where it highlights the scale of Russia's gasoline shortages. The strikes coincided with seasonal demand peaks and scheduled maintenance at several Russian plants, triggering a severe gasoline shortage across the country, the outlet reports. Fuel supply disruptions have hit nearly 60 Russian regions, with annexed Crimea facing the worst shortages. Authorities there have imposed a 20-litre per person cap, prompting panic buying, long queues, and even fuel theft. Local officials have moved to freeze prices for 30 days. These shortages aren't going to get any better anytime soon. In fact, Ukraine's refinery strikes are causing even more damage. On November 4th, the Moscow Times reported that Russia may soon face major issues in its jet fuel market thanks to the months of gasoline supply disruption that Ukraine's refinery strikes have caused. Russia's response to the gasoline shortages has been to loosen requirements on refineries' oil products as it tries to stabilize the domestic market. Those restrictions include allowing refineries to create winter-grade diesel by mixing kerosene and summer-grade diesel. That measure impacts jet fuel, according to the managing partner of Russia's largest private fuel supplier, Petroleum. Maxim Dyachenko says that new risks will hit the aviation sector as a result of Russia's solution, with the likely outcome being that jet fuel prices increase. Russia is creating more problems with each fix it attempts to implement, and it's all thanks to Ukraine's long-range strategy over the last couple of months. Russia's people are dealing with gasoline shortages compounded by rising prices. Soon they may also find that airfares go up if Dyachenko's prediction is correct. Ukraine has already created plenty of problems for Russia with its refinery-focused strategy, and now you can add the increased number of substation strikes into the mix. With the blackouts these strikes are causing all across Russia, many of the country's people may soon find themselves dealing with heating and lighting crises to go along with their fuel problems. It's all pressure piling up. And it's this pressure that Ukraine will be hoping blows back onto Putin in response to him starting the Ukraine war in the first place. The extra little twist to this particular tale is that Ukraine also seems to be seeking a measure of revenge against Russia with its substation strikes. Russia has consistently targeted Ukraine's energy infrastructure every winter since the war began, and it's doing the same thing in 2025. Since October, Korshak writes, Russia's aerial strike planners have shifted their focus to Ukraine's substations. Kyiv, Kharkiv, Dnipro, Poltava, and several other Ukrainian regions have already felt the effects. Ukraine is simply delivering a dose of its own medicine to Russia this time around. The country's president, Volodymyr Zelensky, made that much clear in a vlog on October 6th. The Russians do not understand the cost of all these blackouts, of all the hardships that the people of Ukraine experience and endure during this war, Zelensky said. He added that Russia must feel the price of these actions, stating, "Ukraine strikes back, hitting military targets and energy facilities that sell their energy resources. Russia sells its energy resources and then uses that money exclusively for war. That's why Ukraine is taking absolutely just steps." Ukraine's goal, as we stated earlier, is to create sweeping blackouts in southern and western Russia. If it can hit Moscow, as it did on November 1st, when the streets of Russia's capital were plunged into darkness due to Ukraine's drones, then all the better. That city alone can see temperatures plunge as low as 14 degrees Fahrenheit during winter, which is a long way below freezing and is the sort of temperature no Russian wants to deal with when their electricity is cut off. The question now is which side is going to give first in this battle of the power grids. The answer may be Russia. As Medusa points out in an October article covering Russia and Ukraine's dueling blackout strategies, Ukraine has learned from the Russian strikes of the past. This year, Ukraine is better prepared for another round of attacks, having stockpiled generators and batteries, many with Western support, and deployed repair capacities based on past experience. Basically, they've done what they can to prepare for Russia's next attempt to disrupt the power grid, the outlet reports. It notes that Russia has increased the intensity of its strikes too, which could cause problems, but there is a question that Medusa doesn't answer. How prepared is Russia for Ukraine to use its own strikes against it? The many blackouts that we're already seeing inside Russia due to Ukraine's new strategy suggest that it isn't ready at all. Repairs are being carried out right now, but Russia may soon find itself in a position where it starts running out of the components it needs to keep its substations running. If that happens, temporary blackouts become semi-permanent, and it isn't clear if Russia has the backup capacity needed to ride the incoming storm. All the while, Ukraine will also be continuing its refinery strikes and may end up focusing on other targets in the next few months. One thing is for certain. It's going to be a very uncomfortable winter for Russia. And uncomfortable is the word we'd use to describe how one of Russia's largest aircraft manufacturing suppliers is feeling right now. Ukrainian hackers have pulled off a stunning operation that has revealed top-secret information that the company and Russia never wanted the world to see. The intelligence leak has humiliated Russia so badly that it's hard to watch, as you'll discover if you watch our video. And if you want to see more videos covering the success of Ukraine's latest deep strike strategy, remember to subscribe to The Military Show for daily updates about the war. And thank you, as always, for watching.